Hello everyone, I'm Captain Logan, and it's not Spawn year. It's day 31 of my comic review video day calendar, and this time we're going to go all the way back to 1969 to take a look at an early issue of one of my favorite superhero series, and this is a superhero that I'm kind of surprised that I haven't tackled yet. Meant to. Already done Wolverine, already done some Batman, already done quite a bit of Superman, even did a Tick already, but I haven't tackled any Daredevil. So let's remedy that, shall we? And we're going to go way pre-Miller, and we're going to go to Daredevil number 57. This is, I don't know if this counts as a key issue. I imagine it probably does. I haven't looked this up. I don't know what this is worth. I forgot I had this. This is even not the earliest Daredevil I have. I think I have 2 or 3 before this, but this looked like an exciting cover. This is one of those covers where I wanted to see if the interior matched the the advertising, if it's false advertising or not. And this indeed is exactly what happens in the issue. Daredevil indeed does get unmasked by Karen Page, although it's not exactly what it looks like, in that, she says, "I've unmasked you at last," almost like it was her idea. Daredevil actually at the end of this, spoiler alert, but it's on the cover, goes to Karen Page, and in this graveyard no less, and says, "Hey, I need you to take my mask off. It's important. I am indeed Matt Murdock." But the setting, so the dialogue is different, but the setting is exactly the same. And there's also not a tombstone inside of the comic that says "in the midst of life," but I like that title quite a bit. The main premise of this issue, and this is in the middle of a story arc, but of course, this early, 1969, does a really good job of catching you up to speed, and in fact, makes a real big deal on the first page that it's okay to read this even if you don't know what in the world is going on based on last issue. "Don't let our action-packed beginning throw you off, Pilgrim. We'll explain everything as we go along. Now let's go." You really are supposed to be able to read single issues at this time all by their lonesome, and there will be some recapping, and it's not too in your face and not any more heavy-handed than it ever is in this period, and I needed it because I was completely lost with this situation. And in fact, it doesn't explain absolutely everything. There's not a bunch of flashbacks that bog down the panel count or anything, so there's no explanation as to why Daredevil has faked his own death here. And I didn't look this up. I'm kind of curious to read more of this at some point and find out. I know I keep saying that with a lot of the singles that I've been reading because I've been liking a lot of stuff that I've been looking at. I think Chewbacca's Lover or Senior Sticks or somebody pointed that out in one of the video's comments and said, "Hey, you keep saying you want to keep reading. That's surprising. You seem to be liking a lot of stuff that you're reading." And yeah, not batting exactly 1,000, but doing pretty well so far. And I, unlike a lot of folks, I really like what early Daredevil I've read. There's a lot of what really appeals to people about the character there from the very beginning, and there's certainly some stuff missing too. It's not as tragic and brooding, and Matt Murdock is not as self-destructive. He's not flawed in exactly the same way. The Man Without Fear thing is taken to its furthest extent later on with Miller and Bendis and Wade and on in his getting into a lot of trouble over having that kind of philosophy about life. But anyway, speaking of life, I started giving you the premise, and then I kind of ran off with myself. In the midst of life, Daredevil, as I said, has faked his own death. Everybody thinks that Matt Murdock is dead, and the same is true of Karen Page's father. And so that is the big parallel that we're making between the hero and the villain here. A lot of pretty standard superhero tropes, but we're also turning things on their head and really surprising the reader because, again, the girlfriend is going to find out that Matt Murdock is Daredevil, and in the 57th issue, no less, which is pretty darn early for a thing like this. You wouldn't expect that to happen yet. So we seem to be taking some premises that you see in books like Spider-Man and really going in an unpredictable place with them, going even farther than Spider-Man would. So Spider-Man is constantly taking superhero situations that you're used to and familiar with, and being a little bit smarter, more sophisticated, more novel-esque about it. And Daredevil goes even a step farther than that. Basically takes some of the situations that a high school kid putting on a costume is having and doing it with an adult that has, in some ways, maybe less to lose than Spider-Man does. And so Spider-Man is not going, as we talked about recently, actually, with a Black Cat issue, Spider-Man's not going to reveal his secret identity to a girlfriend until Felicia Hardy, like in the early 80s. I don't think it ever happens before that. Daredevil does it with Karen Page very quickly because he is still, maybe to a fault, not forgetting his own interests and ambitions and living his life even as horrible things are happening around him. So he's faked his own death. Everybody thinks Matt Murdock is dead. He's still planning on proposing to his girlfriend in costume. And I have feelings about the place he chooses to do that, and the fact that it seems to be in front of people, and the comic just conveniently pretends like they're not there. But I'll get to that in a second. So we have kind of a fun identity thing here where we're, again, paralleling the hero and the villain. It's a little bit of that, how dissimilar are they kind of question, although we're not really musing and internalizing, questioning whether Matt Murdock should be a vigilante or not, so much as, I don't know if subtly is the right word, but it's a little bit more subtextual, where we're just kind of presenting, and I really like that a lot, by the way, we're kind of just presenting these two guys and what they're doing, and I'm finding myself drawing that conclusion as I'm reading without the comic itself really commenting on it. And so Daredevil at the beginning is wearing the costume of the bad guy, of Death's Head. That is a real clear symbolic thing there. He and the villain are going through precisely the same thing, but one is on the side of good and one is on the side of evil, but is a kind of typical, again, Spider-Man-esque villain in that he is a tragic character who doesn't mean to be evil, to quote the Cage from Star Trek, but in fact has accidentally poisoned himself with cobalt. So he is the creator of a cobalt bomb, and in his experiments and research, the radiation of the cobalt has affected him and has turned him into Death's Head, into this monstrous creature, which reminds me, of course, a lot of a Norman Osborn. He's a little bit like that character. It's not exactly the same thing in that he's not, in that he's not like greedy and ambitious, and there's some not good qualities to Norman Osborn in the first place. This is treated more like this was an exceptional man. It's talked about how great he is, how good of a person he is. And I guess there's different versions of Norman Osborn, where, sometimes he's a better and nicer guy than others. And I forget exactly the way he's characterized in the earliest Amazing issues, because it's been a while since I've read that. So I'm kind of tiptoeing around a little bit going, am I even right about the analysis I'm doing right now? But it does read like traditionally Norman Osborn is not maybe as good of a person even in the first place as this guy is touted up to be, and it is a Jekyll Hyde thing, but with Norman Osborn it's multiple personalities, it's dissociative identity disorder, and in this case we have a guy who has kind of been completely taken over by a new personality and says that he killed internally, in his mind, the original character, Paxton Page. I like that Karen Page is not alliterative. She's not a superhero or supervillain, but this guy is in the costumed crazy people club in the in the vigilante or costume supervillain club, and so he gets to have an alliterative name. You got Matt Murdock, you got Paxton Page. And anyway, he has also faked his own death, or at least made everybody think that the original Paxton Page is dead because this other personality has taken over. I like the atmosphere of this issue. It's real moody, comparatively. And I don't know, these early issues, like I've read the first 10 and a couple disparate issues here and there up until this point, and there is hokiness in them, certainly, and it's not the hard-edged crime drama and the street-level drama that later Daredevil, of course, is going to be, but there's a charm about it and in a mood, again, an atmosphere that has always really appealed to me, and I don't have a hard time feeling like I'm looking at the same character to some degree, and again, getting some of the same things I like about later Daredevil. So I really enjoyed this. There is a grit about this compared to some other things that Marvel is publishing at the time, and I really love all the different tones that so many different Marvel books carve out. And so this feels like a midpoint between a Spider-Man and a Hulk in tone, in mood. So Karen goes to follow this butler guy who we think is going to end up being the bad guy. He's the red herring. Like, the butler did it immediately when he shoots this plank, which is a crazy panel, by the way. You go, how in the world did this guy know that he could shoot that plank and not murder Karen Page? And there's an okay explanation for that a little bit later toward the end. We think, so we're not supposed to know. I've already kind of spoiled everything. We're not supposed to know that Paxton Page is Death's Head yet. And by the way, just thematically, I like the name of that villain too. So it's about life and death. It's about characters pretending to be dead when they're actually alive, and being, a comedy of, I mean, it's a tragedy, but just the situation, it's a comedy of mistaken identity, of course. And anyway, like I said, a little bit of grit to this. This guy shoots this plank, and you're like, oh, wow, she's about to be in huge trouble. Maybe he's going to kidnap her. What exactly is he doing? And then Daredevil jumps in to save the day. Daredevil has, by the way, been at the Page's home. Nobody knows that he is Matt Murdock, which is interesting because Matt and Karen have been dating, and so, like, he's wanting to marry her. He's in her parents' house, where you would expect he would occasionally maybe spend some time when they get married. He's part of the family, but he will be eventually, maybe if she says yes, but then he's in costume pretending to be a different person. So again, comedy of mistaken identity, a little Shakespearean in that way. And so the reason he's able to pop in when he does is because he's resting after an injury he sustained at the beginning of this, when he's, and I jumped ahead of myself, let me backtrack for a second, when he's being chased by police wearing, like I said at the beginning, the outfit of Death's Head. Death's Head has put him in his own costume. We've seen something like this before already in Not Spawn Year. I read another comic, I guess the second issue that I reviewed this year with the first appearance of Falcon. Captain America found himself looking like a Red Skull and having to run away from enemies of the Red Skull who thought that he was his own arch nemesis. And we get kind of that situation here. Not that Death's Head is Daredevil's actual arch nemesis, of course, but he is tied up and is unable to speak at first and can't really tell them anything, the police. And real quick, I'll backtrack and say this was a situation I thought was a little bit strange. He says he's having a real bad night. He falls off of this horse that's given this weird treatment. I'm assuming it has something to do with cobalt, because this villain, again, being Karen Page's father, who's a scientist and built this cobalt bomb, he's got this research laboratory, and he's got all of these vats of chemicals, and he's able to make a treatment for the horse that makes him turn invisible, or not invisible, but see-through. So he looks like he's got an X-ray machine in him, I guess just for dramatic effect, to make Death's Head look like, or I guess Daredevil as Death's Head look like some kind of an unnatural wraith. And the horse actually ends up dying because it has that treatment, which is nuts. And then Daredevil can't take his mask off because he's broken or hurt, twisted real bad one of his arms. But I'm like, you have your other arm. I don't know why you don't have to lean on it. Why don't you just take the mask off? But he doesn't. And for a second, I thought that was going to be a contrivance so that so that this situation could go on for another page or two while the police were chasing him. But not at all, because then the police take his mask off, which I guess is kind of foreshadowing for what happens at the end, because then he's going to take his real mask off and show Karen Page. So he's got a mask within a mask, all these mistaken identities. And I think that's kind of cool symbolism. And again, I like that none of this stuff is spelled out. It's just kind of in the comic. There's something wonderfully literary about a lot of this. Is it a melodrama and a soap opera? Yeah, you betcha. Of course it is. But it's pretty fun as one of those, and it has again some ideas and thematic stuff that I'm able to really sink my teeth into. As you can tell, I enjoyed this a lot. This is a really good issue, and Matt Murdock, of course, fights the Karen Page's father and reveals that's who it is. He puts it together because at this point it's fairly obvious, and the big tragic twist here is Death's Head, the villain, can't bring himself to let Karen Page die, and he doesn't know why. I know she must live. How come? Well, because he killed, again, in his mind, his real personality, but didn't actually really. There is still a man in there that loves his daughter, and that's also evidenced by the fact that he took on this persona based on a dream that Karen Page had as a child, where she dreamed of this costumed character, this Death's Head, and he remembered that and takes that on as his own persona. This is Daredevil talking to Karen outside after all of this happened. Deep down, he must have remembered your dream. For him, it became the symbol of the death which he must have foreseen. So he knew that the Cobalt was going to kill him, I guess, is the idea. And then this is where it gets a little bit hackneyed, if there's not a little bit of that already. By the way, I just got to mention Gene Colan's art here is wonderful. He just tears it up. Again, lots of ambiance, and then I like the shadow work with Daredevil's face, and again, real expressive. You can tell just what he's thinking without really having to read the dialogue balloons. I like how cinematic pages like this are, pages with Karen Page in them, and he draws really beautiful women, but also really dynamic, exciting action. I think, although I should say, I think his expressive talking scenes when we stop and characters are just speaking to each other, I like that stuff in this comic maybe more than I like the action. The action's good. It's just this is the stuff he's really good at, which is great. He's really right for it because this is so much of a soap opera, and it's so much more about the interpersonal relationships than it is about the battle scenes. And so the action doesn't go on too long. But the reason I say it's hackneyed, it's kind of contrived so that we can have this big beat at the end. Most of this feels like it's driven well enough by the characters and their motivations, and then you get to the end and it feels a little bit TV, where it's almost like the cover was drawn before the rest of the issue, and the choice was made that this is where Karen Page will find out that Matt Murdock is Daredevil. So he's at the funeral and says, I have no more time to delay. There's no reason to wait any longer now that this adventure is over. I'm going to reveal, and this is a wonderful page. I love that this is like in just 3 panels, and the kinetic movement between them. She puts her hand out, she starts to take his mask off. I love that he draws the mask coming off. That's really cool. And then, oh, it's Matt Murdock. Matt Murdock is alive, and what is more, my darling, Matt Murdock is Daredevil. The problem with this, as I alluded to earlier, is look at the top of the page. There's all these people standing around. Of course, it's just like the Daredevil movie where it's a funeral and it's got to be moody and sad, so there's got to be rain. I'm like, the Evanescence music is playing right now, and then we're supposed to just forget that there were people standing there. It's not like, I mean, maybe the idea is that Daredevil waits to get out from behind that tree until everybody has walked off, but you can still see a couple of figures behind her as they're leaving. Why would he take the risk that everybody hasn't left, or that somebody might come back for like a jacket or a pen or something that they accidentally left at the funeral, behind? That seems like a huge mistake. Are there not any other funerals happening today at this cemetery? Is there not a groundskeeper? Is there nobody tending a grave? Like, how can you be sure that this is the right place to take your mask off, or that somebody's not going to see you? But we're not supposed to think about all that. This is just the big surprise that's supposed to happen at the end of the issue. So anyway, that part of it is too easy. But I like it a lot. So good job, Roy Thomas. Some nice writing here, and like I said, I like a lot of the thematic work here. The clear, life and versus death motif, and using death to stay alive. It's real great comic melodrama. And I also meant to mention that, check this out, Stan Lee has to put his name first, even though he had nothing to do with this issue. Stan Lee, editor. And I know Stan Lee's name is on all the books that he was the editor for, but he's before Roy Thomas, and as far as I can tell, he did nothing at all on this issue, except he was the editor. Anyway, everybody, thanks as always for watching. Hope you enjoyed today's review, and I'll be back again tomorrow with another one. We have cleared a whole month of not Spawn Year. I'm so excited. I wish I had party favors, but I didn't get any out. I don't know what I'm reviewing tomorrow, but come back and it'll be a surprise for all of us. Anyway, I was Captain Logan, and thanks for reading.